it. We're on to chapter 14 now of the book Hold On to Your Kids by Gordon Neufeld. This chapter is about collecting our children. We have reached part 4 of the book, and part 4 is called How to Hold On to Your Kids or How to Reclaim Them. So we're starting to look at solutions now, whereas before it was more about like what is happening. Um, at the very top of our agenda, we have to place the task of collecting our children. Collecting our children is what Gordon Neufeld calls drawing them under our wing, making them want to belong to us and with us. To compensate for the cultural chaos of our times, we need to make a habit of collecting our children daily and repeatedly until they're old enough to function as independent beings. We have a little attachment dance that we perform instinctively when adults are around infants, even when they're not their own. These wooing instincts come alive almost automatically. The smiles and the nods, the big eyes, the cooing sounds. Gordon Neufeld calls this the attachment or collecting dance. Unfortunately, for many adults, child collecting instincts are no longer triggered with children past infancy, and especially not with children who, unlike the cute infants, may no longer be trying actively to attach to us. We have lost our instinct with older children. If we've lost our instinct with older children, we need to work on collecting them consciously. There are 4 steps we need to follow from infancy to adolescence. In fact, they're the same steps in all human courtship interactions. So the first thing is to get into a child's face or space in a friendly way. Like he said, we do this with infants. We kind of, we try to attach with them by getting in their face, smiling, nodding, all those things. So we need to keep doing that. And we do generally do it with people we first meet too, right? We try to form a connection. So attract the child's eyes, evoke a smile, and if possible, a nod, which I had never noticed we do that until I read Gordon Neufeld's book, and I started realizing that we nod and try to see, and then we want to see the other person mirror that, and that it makes us feel connected. With infants, we can go over the top with this. With older children, we need to be more subtle, or else they're gonna maybe withdraw because we're being a little too weird. Just like adults get annoyed with a salesperson who's in your face too much, children will also get kind of annoyed and freaked out if we're like, oh, too. Unless you know your child likes that, right? Everybody's different. People have different temperaments and everything. So figure out, be sensitive, and see what your child responds well to. With infants, this courtship interaction is satisfying in itself. Like, we don't want anything in return. We're just happy to get a smile, right? We don't want them to behave. It should be like this past infancy and throughout childhood. With today's emphasis on parenting strategy, we often focus on what to do instead of where to get to. The primary goal should always be the relationship itself, not conduct or behavior. The older children become, the more likely we are to only get in their faces when something goes wrong. And I know we're all looking for kind of solutions for easy fixes, because it's really exhausting when children are not behaving the way we want them to behave. So we're hoping somebody can give us some behavior fix, but Gordon Neufeld says what you need to fix is the relationship. Work on the relationship, because that's the foundation for their behavior, unless they're hungry and thirsty and tired. I mean, you can look at that too, of course, but be like a detective about it rather than like a like a dictator or something. Okay, so according to one study at the beginning of the toddler stage, 90% of maternal behavior consists of affection, play, and caregiving. So we're really good at this when they're little because, their behavior isn't there yet either. So, with only 5% prohibiting the toddler from ongoing activity. So, between the ages of 11 and 17 months, the average toddler experiences a prohibition every 9 minutes. So, yeah, those are challenging times for us and for the toddlers, which is also important to, make your environment as child-proof and child-friendly as possible so you don't have to step in for safety reasons all the time and put limitations. We need to keep getting in their faces in ways that are warm and inviting, that keep enticing them to stay in relationship with us. So yeah, you do have to put limits as a parent for sure. But if that's the only time you interact with them and when they're doing something you don't want them to do, that doesn't make for a pleasant relationship. When children get older, it can shift from getting into their faces to getting into their space, but it's still very important to establish a connection. Sometimes with my teenage son, I just kind of sit in the same room with him, don't really say anything, and just be available for him to connect with me if he wants to. So it doesn't have to be right in his face. He might not appreciate that as they get older, but just to make yourself available sometimes. The collecting dance cannot evolve if we just follow short term behavior goals without keeping in mind our long term objective of a nurturing relationship. Yeah, it's really important. I mean, the short term behavior goals, like they might work in the short term, but keep your relationship in mind and make sure you don't damage your relationship by the kind of discipline you use. And if you do mess up, and we all do, and you do sometimes yell and say things you wish you hadn't said or whatever, make sure you reconnect with them and, spend some positive time with them. Allow yourself to experiment and explore. It's a matter of trial and error, not a behavioral prescription. For every child, a different dance will emerge. Yeah. If you have more than one child, you'll see they all have different personalities and they all need to be parented somewhat differently. So you have to kind of feel it out rather than he can't just give you a prescription book of when this happens, you do this, because every child is different, every child reacts differently, and you have to kind of feel out what works. It's especially important to collect your children after any time of separation. Attachment rituals exist in many cultures. The most common is the greeting for a successful interaction. So we all have that in all cultures, that we greet each other, and usually in a friendly way to establish a positive connection. A greeting should collect the eyes, a smile, and a nod. In many countries, it is still customary and expected to greet children. Here we don't always greet our own children, let alone someone else's child. So Gordon Neufeld is Canadian. He lives in Vancouver. I was surprised about him saying that. I kind of feel like we do greet children. Maybe not everybody does, but this might be something worth paying attention to see if we always do it, or if maybe sometimes when people are distracted, they just come rushing in the house and start talking about what happened and completely forget to acknowledge their child. As children lose their own drive to connect with us after separation, it may seem less important for us to reach out to them. Nothing could be further from the truth. We must compensate with our own enthusiasm and initiative. So I found that with my own kids as they got older, and then they moved their rooms into the basement. That sometimes, when they're teenagers, they would just come in and want to head straight down into the basement. And after reading some parenting books like this, I realized I couldn't just let them withdraw like that. And I started kind of drawing them into attention when into attachment when they came in and said, "Oh, hey, oh, were you out with so-and-so or whatever?" And it was amazing. They would just right away come upstairs, sit down, start telling me stuff. And I thought, what a missed opportunity, if you just let them withdraw like that because they do still want to connect with us if we show interest. Um, so we get separated by school and work, but also by other experiences like being totally focused on the TV. So we also then need to reestablish a connection. We can't expect to just yell out or say some sort of demand to them while they're watching TV or whatever. Their focus is elsewhere while they're doing that. So you have to reestablish a connection, maybe sit with them and chat about the show they're watching a little bit, and then say, okay, now it's time to have supper, put that on pause or whatever. Um, because they're not going to want to listen if their attention is elsewhere, just like we don't want to either, right? To be honest. Um, so he says, connect before you direct. And I think there's more about it later in the book, how, we do this with other people. We don't just like tell them what to do without connecting first and then ask for a favor or whatever. Collecting our children is also important after the separation caused by sleep. Mornings might look a lot different if you properly collect your child before anything else happens. So he talks about doing this in his own family. They just decided to set the alarm a little bit earlier and spend some time just snuggling before, it's time to have breakfast and get ready and all of that. And he said it made a huge difference in their family because children, they need a little bit of time to, switch on. We can't just like, go, 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 rush, 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 right? They're, we do that a lot to kids that we rush them. And yeah, it might be better to lose a little bit of sleep just to make that whole morning, make you off to a good start, both of you. We need to build routines of connecting with our children into our daily lives. In addition to that, it's especially important to reconnect with them after any sort of emotional separation, like after a fight or argument. Rebuilding the interpersonal bridge between us and our children is our responsibility. I think he talks more about that later too, but it is really important that, it's not like you're mad at them until they come and apologize. Because even though you're mad at them, and maybe very rightfully so, you can spend some time being mad at each other, but then it's up to you as the adult to rebuild the relationship and let them know that even though you were mad about that, you always love them. They don't have to worry about your love. For teachers or any other adult who takes care of children not their own, collecting them should always be the first order of business. Otherwise, they might resist the demands and instructions of strangers, which makes sense. That's why they give a substitute teacher a hard time. They feel like, who are you walking in here and telling us what to do? We don't even know you. Our loyalty is with our teacher. It's this act of collecting a child that sets the master teacher aside from all the others. Gordon Neufeld talks about when he was in grade 1, he had a teacher who was really good at collecting him. She came up to him and introduced herself and showed pleasure in him being there and really made him feel welcome. And he said she won his heart immediately, and he was like putty in her hands for the whole year. Made the teacher's life easier too, right? If she had this great relationship with all her students who wanted to, please her because they loved her. And he said, and then after that, there were 5 years of not having teachers who did that, and he didn't feel any connection. And he said it was like a wasteland throughout those years. So it's good to keep that in mind. It doesn't cost us anything. It's like a few extra minutes of our time to show our excitement and pleasure of our children and orient them a little bit as to, I'm so and so, and this is where you hang your coat, and all of that. Make them feel comfortable. Okay, so he said there are 4 things that we have to do to collect our children. So the second one, so the first one was get in your child's face or space in a friendly way. The second one is provide something for the child to hold on to. He says to engage children's attachment instincts, we must offer them something to attach to. With infants, this could be placing your finger into the palm of their hand, and then usually they grip down, and it's like an early kind of way to attach to each other in a very direct and physical way. And of course, there are many, many other emotional ways we attach with our infants too, by smiling at them and they smile back when they're old enough to be able to do that, and singing to them, and all the ways we show them that we care and that we're there. So as children get older, the point is not holding on physically, but holding on figuratively. Whatever we provide must come from us and be ours to give. And whatever we give to our children, the key is that in holding on to it, they will hold on to us. So researchers have identified emotional warmth, enjoyment, and delight at the top of their list as effective activators of attachment. So you don't have to spend any money. You just have to show them that you love them, that you're excited about them, smile at them, make them feel engaged with you. By having a twinkle in your eye, warmth in your voice, and showing children that they matter to us, we invite a connection. So it's actually pretty simple. Hugs can also warm a child long after the embrace. With children who feel too vulnerable to connect in these ways, if they're already older and they already have their shell of defenses around them, you can start by connecting through sameness. That's not very vulnerable, right? To say, oh, I noticed like you like lilacs. I really like them too. Just find a way, to have something in common, or to demonstrate some loyalty by being on their side. The ultimate gift is to make a child feel invited to exist in our presence exactly as he or she is, to express our delight in his very being. That's what we all want, right? We want somebody to just love us the way we are. This can be conveyed through gestures, words, in symbols, and in actions. There's lots of ways to show that. The child must know that she's wanted, special, significant, valued, appreciated, missed, and enjoyed. It needs to be genuine and unconditional. So when you're faking it, the child probably picks up on that. But I'm sure there are things where you feel genuinely like that. This is why Gordon Neufeld doesn't recommend using separation as punishment, because it's so important for us to have this strong connection with our children. So if we use it as a punishment, like, get away from me because you're being annoying or whatever, I don't want you around me when you're doing this and that. If you're doing that, it's very hurtful for them, because they want you to love them even when they're annoying, right? And so to push them away, like into a timeout for punishment, can be very hurtful for them. If you feel like you're gonna murder them, then put them in timeout. That's definitely a safer option. But overall, try to not use it as a punishment. You can say, well, let's read some stories now to calm down, or help them redirect that energy, or set them up with something away from you. Give yourself a little break, whatever you need to do. But at least don't be hurtful about it, that it's like, you're bugging me, therefore get away from me now. The child must perceive our offerings of, connecting with them as spontaneous, not as expected, like for a birthday, to satisfy their hunger for connection. So if only for special occasions you show them that you love them, that's not good enough for them. So we also can create a connection by indulging a child's demands. Although we can damage the relationship by withholding from a child when he's expressing a genuine need. Meeting needs on demand should not be mistaken for enriching the relationship. So if your child like says, "I need a hug," and you give them a hug, that's good. It's better than not giving them a hug. If you withheld it and said, "No, get away from me, I'm still mad at you," or whatever, that can be damaging for the relationship because they're in a tricky situation, right? Like you're the person who gives them love and you're also the person who gives them discipline sometimes. So if you have just disciplined them, they need comfort from somebody, and it's probably you. So, don't deny them the things they need, is what he's saying. But just fulfilling what they ask for is not as satisfying as you taking initiative. It's like in a relationship with your husband. If he only gives you a hug when you ask for it, it's like meh. You hope he takes some initiative too sometimes, right? That he also has the urge to just come up and hug you sometimes, or however you guys express a connection between you. Doesn't have to be hugs. Not everybody's a hugger, but you expect him to also, or her to take initiative, so that that's how you feel loved, right? Not just somebody doing what you ask them to do, which is good too, but not as good as doing it spontaneously. So our offerings of connection should come willingly, unexpectedly, and with some enthusiasm. That's ideal. We all would like that the most. If what we offer can be earned or is seen as some kind of reward, it will not serve as a nurturing connection. So yeah, if you're only giving hugs after your child has done their homework, then it's like payment, right? It's not really showing true affection. We can show our pleasure in his or her existence through gestures, smiles, tone of voice, a hug, or suggesting a joint activity. So there are different ways to show that you are interested in having this connection, right? Like for some people, spending time together is the number one way of doing that. So whatever works, and often a combination of all of those. It's widely believed to give into a child's requests is to spoil a child. That fear contains no more than a grain of truth, he says. Some parents compensate for, instead of giving them like the attention that we're talking about, the stuff you need to feel love, sometimes parents give their kids stuff instead. What is spoiling them is not necessarily the stuff you're giving, it's the stuff you're not giving them. That you're not giving them the love and the connection and the acceptance, because the stuff is just empty, meaningless, really. It doesn't really satisfy them. So what spoils is the lack of the true connection. He says, just like if you leave meat out of the fridge, it spoils. It spoils because you didn't do something you should have done. So, I wouldn't recommend to buy them everything they want or anything like that. But with like giving love and connection, you don't spoil them. It's just like, with infants, people used to say, don't pick them up, you'll spoil them. I think what they meant is that they'll always want to be carried around. Well, infants do want to be carried around a lot because they need you to carry them around. They're helpless. You need to take care of them. It's not spoiling them. What's spoiling them, what would ruin them, is to not pay any attention and not give them the love and connection, because you need all of that to build a healthy self-esteem and to be able to mature and all of that for later on in your life. So don't worry about spoiling with giving something heartfelt, and it can be a gift too sometimes, that's okay. So you decide what feels right to you. When a child demands a lot of attention, just giving in to their demands won't satisfy their emotional needs. The solution is to seize the moment and invite contact when the child is not demanding it. If the child initiates the contact, it's only satisfying if we respond very enthusiastically and let them know we were also thinking about doing that, maybe. So, like if your child is always like, wants your attention, wants your attention, wants your attention, like you often feel like, you want some space and time, and it can be tricky. But the more you push them away, the more they want to cling. So give them willingly when you have the time. I mean, you don't always have the time, but when you have the time, figure out something fun to do together, something unexpected, something they're excited about, so that they feel that strong connection, and then they can relax, and then they can play on their own. I find that, like with my grandkids too, my grandson, he wants a lot of attention when he first sees us. And then, if we spend some time playing, then he starts like puttering around on his own, singing to himself, and he's content, right? But you gotta feel like that connection is there initially. Gordon Neufeld told this story one time about one of his kids saying, "I love you, Dad," and he said, "I love you too." And the kid said, "No, you don't, or you would have said it first." So, it doesn't feel good enough sometimes to just hear something parroted back. So he said, if your child tells you something first, you can make them feel satisfied by making it bigger. If your child says, "I love you," you can say, "And I love you even more." Then they feel like, oh, that felt good, right? So that's what he means by you can kind of make it your own idea, or make it more enthusiastic to make them feel satisfied about it. So he says it's not showing a child with showering a child with praise doesn't work as an alternative to collecting the child. Praise is usually about something the child has done. So it's neither a gift nor spontaneous. A child cannot hold on to praise because it is subject to cancellation with every failure. Even if a child could hold on to the praise, it wouldn't be holding on to the praise giver, but the achievement that produced it. And what you're looking for with collecting is that they hold on to you. So praise doesn't quite work for that. He says it's not a bad thing to praise someone, it just shouldn't be overdone. A child's motivation shouldn't depend on the opinion of others. A child's self-image should not rest on her success in gaining our approval by means of achievements or compliant behavior. The foundation of a child's true self-esteem is the sense of being accepted, loved, and enjoyed by the parents exactly as he or she is. So, they shouldn't feel like they have to be good all the time, or just do as they're told all the time, to feel loved and accepted. So, so praise, use it in moderation, and if you can praise the effort, like, "Oh, you've been working hard on that," rather than saying, "You're so smart." So to encourage the effort, because otherwise it's kind of like a finished thing already, smart, and then if you think you're so smart, you think everything should come to you easily, and it doesn't always work that way. That's just an aside. Okay, so the third way of collecting a child, first it was getting in their space or face, and then providing something for them to hold on to. And this one is inviting dependence. So if the infant is old enough, we invite their dependence by extending our arms. And then if they extend their arms, then we go pick them up. And then we carry them around. To invite an older child to depend on us is to convey to the child that she can trust us, count on us, lean on us, be cared for by us. Before this can happen, there needs to be trust, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, daycare teacher, step-parent, foster parent, whoever you are, there needs to be trust. Here, sometimes our new world ideas of independence get in the way. We have no problem inviting the dependence of infants. But after independence becomes our primary objective lots of times, They should dress themselves, feed themselves, settle themselves, entertain themselves, think for themselves, and solve their own problems. We fear if we give dependence an inch, it takes a mile. What we're really encouraging is not true independence, only independence from us. Dependence is transferred to the peer group. So, in thousands of little ways, we pull and push our children to grow up, hurrying them along instead of inviting them to rest. We're pushing them away from us rather than bringing them to us. Can you imagine if, like, in a relationship, if your partner said to you, anything you can do for yourself, you should do for yourself. You have to do for yourself. I'm not going to help you with anything because I know you can do it, so do it. You do it. Like when you first meet somebody and they're courting you, they kind of want to be helpful, right? Well, let me help you with that. And that's all part of like a relationship is you don't want to make them dependent on you for everything. Of course, like a certain amount of independence is good, but you also don't want to just push them to do everything for themselves because we generally help people and that's a nice thing. And people want to be helped, at times. So they'll let you know when they want independence. Mine, do it myself. Me do it. So you can just listen to them when they want to be independent, and you can help them where they need help. Like with adults, we are often more helpful, but they are adults. They could do it themselves. So why don't we offer that to our children too when they need help, or when it's just nice to help them with stuff sometimes. So he says maybe we feel free to invite dependence of adults because we're not responsible for their growth and maturity. We don't bear the burden of getting them to be independent. That's probably a good point. So we often the stuff we do as parents, we do with good intentions because we feel like it's our job to make them independent. And we think it's all up to us, forgetting that nature plays a big role in maturation. We feel like we have to make them be independent. So when we do our job of meeting genuine dependence needs, nature is free to do its job of promoting maturity. So if we take care of them and let them depend on us, then nature can promote maturity and independence and that strive for independence which will come. Just like it's not our job to make children grow taller, it's just our job to feed them. It's not our job to make them be independent in this kind of pushy way. Perhaps we think if we don't push, they'll never leave the nest. But humans aren't like birds. The more we push, the more they cling to us, or they give up and find another nest, which can be peers or somebody else if we're not giving them what they need. We cannot get to spring by resisting winter. We cannot get to independence by resisting dependence. Dependence comes first, then comes independence. A master teacher, rather than pushing students towards independence, supplies them instead with generous offerings of assistance. It's more likely to foster independence in the end. And that makes sense for parents too, right? To at least offer help. They can take it or not. And you can gently nudge them towards independence. Just don't push too hard. Okay, and the last one, last thing to do to collect our children is to act as the child's compass point. So a fourth way to engage the child's attachment instincts is to orient the child, just like with the magnet that we were talking about in other chapters about how attachment works. We do this instinctively with infants. Again, we seem to be really good with infants, and then it kind of gets a little trickier. We carry them around, we show them things, we point out the names of things, we familiarize them with their environment. Sometimes we lose this orienting instinct when our children get older. We no longer assume the role of introducing them to those around them, familiarizing them with their world, informing them of what is going to happen, and interpreting what things mean. But you might have found that it makes life easier if you do that. If you give them a heads up, then they don't suddenly have a meltdown because they don't know what the heck is going on anymore. We know how important it is when we ourselves get lost. Like if you're traveling and you're somewhere else and you're lost, it's very scary, makes you anxious. And then if somebody comes and helps you, you're very grateful. So even we feel that way as adults. So you can imagine how disorienting it is to children when we just pick them up, stuff them in the car seat, take them somewhere they don't even know where they're going, expect that they just like run into this room full of people and start having fun. They don't even know them. We gotta mediate for them, especially when you have a child who's introverted or shy. Kind of, don't worry that they're going to be like that forever and push them into being social, because that's just going to make them withdraw more. Just be very gentle and supportive, be there alongside them, help them out, and they will come out of their shell in good time. They will. I had one of those. um, so, part of the difficulty for parents is that we no longer feel like experts in the world of our children. Um, it doesn't take children long to figure out computers and the internet, sometimes to the point where we ourselves feel like in need of orientation. Um, Another part of the problem is that peer orientation has robbed our children of the feeling of being lost and confused. Sometimes they just, have this tough armor on and don't really show their confusion on their faces anymore. And when they don't show their confusion on their faces anymore, it doesn't give us that cue to come in and help them out either. Um, so, due to all the changes in the world, it's more important than ever to summon our confidence and assume our position as the working compass point in our children's lives, past the early years until they have truly become independent. So, it's way past the infant years where they need you. And, and even when they are independent, like my adult children still come to me and ask me stuff and want to connect with me and ask advice and stuff. And I do that with my mom still too. It never really truly ends, and you'd hope it doesn't, because it's nice really to be there for them and be part of their lives that way too. So, and then the last part in this chapter is reclaiming peer-oriented children. So the 4 steps about how to collect children and bring them into attachment with their caregivers work for most kids. But what if you've already lost a child to peer attachment? There's always something you can do. We can't force a relationship, but what we can do is invite and entice, and to make it as easy as possible for lost children to return, and make it as difficult as possible for the competition to hold on to them, which is peers most of the time. So remember that they need us, even if they don't know it. If they're pretending they're all grown up, but they're only 14 or whatever, they still need you. Even the most hostile teenager needs a nurturing parent, and I'd say maybe especially a hostile teenager still needs a parent. Regardless of their age, writes U.S. child psychiatrist Stanley Greenspan, youngsters can begin working on developmental levels they have been unable to master, but they can do so only in the context of a close personal relationship with a devoted adult. So if they haven't matured yet all the way, they can still reach another level of maturation, but only in a relationship where they feel safe. We need to create an attachment void by separating the child from her peers, and then place ourselves in the void as substitutes. So if they're extremely peer attached, sometimes you need to keep them at home or find other ways to put yourself in the lead again. Often, if peer orientation isn't too advanced, a gentle reversal can be accomplished by imposing some restrictions on peer interactions, while at the same time making it a priority to collect the child whenever possible. So sometimes, you don't have to totally cut the peers out or anything. You can just try to spend more time with them, show how much you care in all the different ways we talked about, and see if you can get them to come back to be more attached to you again that way. He says it's important not to reveal your agenda or it can backfire. So if they know, if you tell them, well, I read this book and blah, 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 it doesn't really make you sound like you know what you're doing or you're in the lead. But he wants you to be in the lead with this. And he wants them to feel like you're genuinely, from you, this comes from you, that you're genuinely interested in spending time with them and, having a friendly relationship with them again. The hardest part for many parents is to make the shift from behavior to relationship. Once the relationship has deteriorated, the behavior can become increasingly offensive and alarming. Under such circumstances, we find it increasingly difficult to stop criticizing. So if your child is very peer related and thinks everything you say is stupid or whatever, they can become pretty offensive in their language to you, and it's hard to not just hear that and focus on that and forget about that actually what you wanted to do is rebuild your relationship. Even with little kids, if they're screaming, I hate you, generally we focus on, no, you don't really hate me, and you're trying to convince them or whatever, but their brain at that time is not taking that in. What they really want is empathy from you and to say, you're really mad right now, you were so mad about that. And then if you show empathy, it can help them de-escalate. And then once they're calm and the relationship is better again, then you can address that hate is a hurtful thing to say to somebody, to hate them. And then they're open to hearing it. So also with teenagers, if their language is offensive to you, but what they're telling you is like, somebody just really upset them because they're this and that and whatever. And if you're only focusing on the choice of words rather than they're hurt and upset, you're not going to get anywhere. So you might have to put that aside initially and address it later. He says a word about grounding. He said if you're using it just in a punitive way, it's not going to have a good long-term effect or anything like that. If you do ground your kids, use that opportunity to reconnect with them. Not be mad at them the whole time they're grounded and make each other's lives miserable. You're going to be mad maybe initially, but then reconnect so to repair the relationship. He says, whatever is within your possibilities, but you can do things like going on a camping trip, or maybe just taking them out for the day, doing something where you're in the lead, going somewhere where you know the way and maybe they don't and they have to depend on you, and be friendly, and don't use the opportunity to harp on them about anything if you can help it. It's like if you're in a relationship with an adult and the relationship's getting kind of on shaky terms and your partner takes you out on a picnic, you wouldn't use that opportunity to tell your partner all the things you think he or she has done wrong and that are stupid or whatever. Like when you're in a rebuilding phase, like try to be positive, have a good time together to rebuild the relationship. He talks at the end of the chapter about two of his own children who became very peer oriented, and how he took them on two different outings that were special to them, and how it took a while to win them over. At first they're just like grumpy that he was not the person they wanted to spend time with and stuff. And he did it one at a time, so one-on-one time. But he did win them over. And one of his daughters said, why did you leave me in the first place? He didn't feel like it was him who left her, but he said, you can't blame the child, really. You're supposed to be in the lead as an adult. And you got to make some time. It doesn't have to be this super special time to go to Disneyland or whatever. It's just the everyday kind of nods and smiles, showing interest, showing excitement, and just genuine joy that we generally show our really little kids. Keep that going. They still need that as they get older.
This was very long. I hope you managed to stick with it all and it was worth it, because I think there's some really good information in there. All right.